Hey guys, it's John. You're on the JRB Tree Climbing channel, also the name of my Patreon, my Facebook, and my website, jrbtreeclimbing.com. I have been waiting to do this video for 2.5 years, and the content is about a false crotch and a floating anchor. So I'll be tying both of these and show you how I use them. If you choose to use either of these devices in your own climbing, I ask that you consider all of the details and take responsibility for your actions. And do not try to reproduce anything I do here today in demonstrating this, as I'll be taking some calculated risks that I don't want anyone else to take. So this is how I typically tied a false crotch. A false crotch is an anchor point in a tree when the tree doesn't provide one naturally in the form of a tree crotch. And so I'll show you how I build this. And below it I have a floating anchor which looks very similar but has the rope going around the tree, and I'll show you how I build that. It's typical that your wingspan, the distance that your fingertips reach out, is about the same as your height. And so when I reach around this tree, my fingers just overlap a few inches. And so I know that this is about the same as my height. This piece of webbing is twice my height, or 12 feet. And I've tied it in a single water knot. You can see my video on how to tie the water knot, or if you want even greater security, the double water knot, which is 2 water knots in series. Dedicated video on that. So here I've tied a sling, right? And you can use, ideally, we're going to use polyester. I understand is the best fiber for longevity with respect to ultraviolet light. But anything we leave in a tree, we are taking a calculated risk in terms of its stability when we return. I definitely wouldn't leave anything in a tree longer than your hunting season. But yes, in the few weeks of my hunting season, I have left a false crotch in a tree and returned to climb on it. And folks have brought up the very good point that there's no guarantee that a critter of some sort might have chewed on that and compromised its integrity. And I ask you to consider that as a risk when you might employ this, and why you might choose something like the floating anchor instead. So the implement itself is very simple. We've got the web sling. I'm going to form a girth hitch. Form a simple girth hitch. I'm not too particular about any folds in it or whatever. I'm going to reach around the tree. And it just so happens that I chose a tree today that's just, if it was any bigger, I would not be able to pull this off. So I'm going to put that up on the tree, and I can just get the end of the sling through the girth hitch. You can just get it. And this is the typical length of sling I carry with me. But obviously, if I was going to be in a bigger tree, I would need an even bigger sling. So this being a girth hitch and forming a girth hitch around the tree, that is actually can be called a double girth hitch. In Ashley's book of knots, interestingly, the girth hitch isn't mentioned, but this very same knot, the girth hitch, is called the ring hitch, and it's also called the strap hitch. And when configured this way, it is called a double ring hitch or a double strap hitch. You can look that up in Ashley's book of knots. And so we can safely call this a double girth hitch, or I sometimes used to call it a running girth hitch, although it doesn't run very well, it cinches. So this is what I would climb on. I would put my Paracord preset through this, and I would climb on this the entire season. And yes, there is some risk that the strap could become compromised, and so that is what took me 2.5 years to get to this point where I was ready to do this video and acknowledge that and provide another option. Now, if I'm climbing on this anchor, you know, I could climb on a single rope, or I could climb on a moving rope or a stationary doubled rope. It will make a very tight bend when the rope goes around here, so you might use something even larger in diameter, like a shackle or 2 carabiners side by side. But that's pretty straightforward. We would climb on that. Obviously, I'm doing this from the ground today to keep you in view, but when you set this the first time, you got up in the tree somehow safely. You either stick climbed or you SRT climbed. Maybe the height was perfect. You just wanted it on the opposite side of the tree just for positioning purposes. Whatever the reason, you got up in a tree and you want to set a false crotch or a floating anchor. Now, I have fashioned this one intentionally with paracord. I don't really recommend paracord for this. It works. I prefer that you use something like your web sling. But I've intentionally fashioned this one in paracord so I could show you the dynamics of it. So when we rig this, okay, let me pull this through and show you what happened here. I got a little extra paracord here getting in your nerves, right? But I always cut things longer than I need them. So this is also a double girth hitch, fashioned with paracord. Everything's the same, just that it's paracord. And then I took a piece of paracord, put it in the carabiner, around the tree and around the other side. And that would constitute a paracord preset. And so now I'm on the ground, I arrive, I've got my paracord preset, I've got one of my stainless steel or brass boat clips. You see in my prior videos how I'm fond of these, because even if I have gloves on or my fingers are cold, I can pull this off. And this is my JRB end loop, which is fashioned at a paracord on this 9mm rope. I'm on the ground. I'm walking away from the tree to get about a 45-degree angle. So I'm pretty far away from the tree as I do this. And I pull this up. And so watch what happens. That'll flip through the carabiner around the back of the tree. This is a very rough bark tree. And you can see I can pull that all the way down the other side. We can set a single rope anchor using this point. Now, I want to point out while it's in this position, the fact that I have at least a foot of space here on this, that is helping me rig. If I try to do it here where it's really tight, it might be more difficult. So I like a little bit of room. I like to set this nice and high, a good foot or so below where I want my anchor point. So now, and this is not a knot tying video, but again, I'm on the ground. I have enough rope to do this. I fashion a running JRB hitch running JRB hitch, and I will lock it from unintentional release. And again, I'm on the ground and I pull on that. I just pull on that and I lock it on the tree. Now see here, now you can see how it's away from the tree a little bit. So I'll pull to the left, and then again I'm on the ground, pull to the right, and it cinches against the tree. I can climb on that. You can get this from underneath where you can see you've got it tight on the tree. You can climb on this, and that's what I'm going to demonstrate on the other side of the tree. Okay, so let's see how I fashion this floating anchor. So again, my height, I'm not bringing any measuring devices in the woods with me, right? My height is roughly my wingspan, and so I can gauge off of that I need to go around the tree twice. So here's one wingspan, here's a second wingspan, and then I need a foot to come down plus some extra room to form my knots. So I have, you know, roughly another wingspan. You don't need quite that much, but I like to have plenty of cord. So I cut that cord, and now I'm going to fashion my floating anchor on the tree. So I go around the tree, get it, you know, where I want it on the tree, because I'll be operating a foot lower, right? A foot lower is roughly where the anchor will be. When I get it in position, I form a girth hitch, in this case with my right hand, and then I pass the two strands through the girth hitch and cinch that in place. So that's the location of, you know, this will stay put. Now decide at what height I want my actual anchor. And so again, I want to have, you know, roughly an elbow to elbow distance, at least a foot between these two, and just the quickest possible hitch here. I'm going to make a poacher's knot, but using 2 strands. So you recall how I make a poacher's knot is I hold the end of the cord, go around my finger twice, and then pass both loops through. So go see my earlier video on how to form the poacher's knot or the scaffold knot, and I put my carabiner there. That looks perfect. I will be fashioning this on the other side of the tree. You won't be able to follow that detail, and we'll take you through the entire operation. Okay, so despite the fact that I'm only a foot or 2 off the ground, that doesn't matter, right? You can picture me much higher. We just want to do this to keep you in the field of view. So it doesn't matter how you're climbing here, right? You could be climbing with climbing sticks. You could be using, look, right now I'm on a JRB, an SRT system, right? This is what I used to do before I discovered the JRB doubled rope method. And my tie-in point is much higher than I want it, right? So I needed to use a longer rope to get here. I might have done it, I might have done this before the season and got all set up, but I'm roughly, this is the spot I want to hunt from. Okay, so just like I showed you on the ground, you just won't be able to follow the detail. Let's get our carabiner. Now, I find this to be a good application for carabiners you might not use in climbing. So, for example, this is an old carabiner. It's a double action, not a triple action. The other one I had here was a screw gate. So I tend to use, for false crotches, I use strong carabiners, but maybe not my best ones for climbing. So I've got that ready to go, and I need to now just rig my preset. So I've got my paracord with me, right? I'm not sure how much of this I need exactly, and so we're just going to rig it. We want both of these going in the front and out the back. In the front and out the back. Okay, so obviously I'd put enough cord through so it reaches the ground, but I'm good to go. Okay, so now I've returned to the tree. I could be doing this immediately after I rigged it or at another time. I locate my paracord preset, use a girth hitch to put the stainless steel clip, boat clip on the end. I use my JRB end loop, and I'm going to want to carefully set those prusik so they're on the opposite side of the end of the rope, because this is a tough rigging scenario. I have tested this in a lot of trees, and on ones just like this one, sometimes they won't go around if this bark is really rough. So I wanted this to be a realistic challenge today, and we could have some trouble getting this up, but let's give it a try. So again, I'm very close to it. In a taller tree, I would have walked away from the tree so that I get that carabiner away from the tree. And as it approaches the crotch or the anchor, I flip it through. And now I just want to keep this moving. I just want to walk away from the tree until it comes through the other side, because I just don't want it to give it any chance to get hung up. It was a JRB doubled rope climb, and if this was a trusted anchor, we could climb on it. But obviously we can't do that on paracord, and obviously if the anchor in any way could be compromised, we don't want to try it. And so now we're into an SRT, or a single rope climb or anchor. Again, I'm going to fashion my Running JRB Hitch. This is not a knot tying video. We've got a separate video on tying the Running JRB Hitch. I put it through. When it's through, if I were to pull on this, it would release, but I lock it. I lock it by dropping this through there, and then I pull it up into the tree. So this is again, rough bark tree. I'm really gonna have to work to get this set. I'm going to move in front of the camera. I'm going to move to the left, then the right. See how I moved to the left? It cinched it in. And again, I get under the tree and I make sure that it's not, that there's not additional room to ratchet that closed. But once that is on, I am good to climb. And this won't be much of a climb, but let's just throw my body weight on there. Now that paracord is under load. It's under load. And so, obviously, I don't recommend using paracord. I recommend using webbing. But if we get this cinched nice and tight, we're not dependent on it. And so, I'm going to do something a little crazy here. And of course, don't try this at home, but I'm going to cut this paracord. This is a test, of course. I'm just proving that my load remains cinched on this. Now, when this gets cut, this might drop an inch, might drop 2 inches, but the point is that we're not dependent on this, right? So this is webbing. We tied it 6 weeks ago. A porcupine has been seen in the area. There's a chance that it chewed on your false crotch made out of webbing. And if it were to go, we want to make sure we're safe. So here goes nothing. Okay, so you saw what happened. We moved about 2 inches, maybe an inch and a half. I wasn't paying that much attention, but I'm safely cinched onto the tree. Okay, I want to get in detail and show you this one more time and on a different diameter tree. So this is about a basketball diameter tree. Pretty much the standard, I understand, for most saddle hunters. And so you can see with the 12-foot sling, twice my height, this distance is just a little long. So we have options. We can run it that way, but it might be a little higher than we want to reach. We can adjust our water knot, right? We adjust our water knot with just our finger strength. Or here's another sling. This one's seen some, I could tell you some stories. This one was tied with approximately 9 feet. So I'm just going to form it with this. So again, here's how I do it. I'm going to create a girth hitch with my right hand. Just create a girth hitch. Not trying to make it pretty. Reach around the tree. Put it up roughly where I want it. I can always bring it down a little, but it's hard to raise it up. And I put the bite through the girth hitch. I get that roughly where I want it. Now here's the thing. Whenever we set our hitch, let's say that I want this to be a false crotch. So I'm going to run it like a false crotch. Well, in that case, you could put it right above where you want to be. So I'm standing on my platform, and if I want to be in this location, I'll put it here. But if you're running this as a floating anchor, it's always going to be offset one way or the other. So I'm going to go ahead and rig it here just so you can see where it winds up. Let's take our carabiner, put it on. I use pear-shaped carabiners. I like a wide opening. That gives more room for the rope to run through. Sometimes I've also used large rappel rings for this, but they would need to be on the sling before you tie it. So a little bit of planning and purchasing there. All right, now, so before I got down, I would put in my paracord preset. Okay, so here's my paracord. I'm going to put it in the front on the left side, around the right side, through the carabiner, and of course we have options once we get to the ground, but let's say I want to rig my rope from the right side. I would descend to the ground. Now, if you don't want to use the stainless steel clip, which makes a little noise going through the carabiner. Now, I don't expect you to follow this at all, but I'll tie a running Highwayman's hitch here, so a no metal solution. Again, you go see my prior video on the running Highwayman's hitch, but I simply put the paracord through my end loop. I put a bite over, go around the back, put a bite over, and then put a bite through, and then with the end I lock it. I don't even tighten that, I just leave it like that, and that can rig. Now watch what happens when I get this up there. So the first point is I want to make sure that my JRB end loop, you know, that I've got my little Prusix on either side. That'll help it go through. So as it approaches, I give a good tug, and as it approaches, give a good tug. And so that time you didn't hear the clankety clank of metal on metal. Now, I'll bring it all the way down to the ground. I'm going to get a little closer to the camera, right? We're simulating the angle and the position I would be in a tree. So I'd obviously be much further away from the tree. The Running JRB hitch that I'm fashioning right here is extremely strong. It's extremely strong. And I don't need to tighten that because I want it to run. But if I pull on this right now, it would release. We don't want that to happen. And so we will lock it. First we'll remove the running Highwaymans. Similar, I had a bite in there to lock it. But now that comes out, that's gone. I lock it like this. That's all I do. I leave this bite and then I pull this up. Now watch what happens. I'm pulling in a direction basically straight away from my tie-in. See how it wants to go to the right? Wants to go to the right. And then right about here, I can't pull any further, but I want it to ratchet closed. Well, if I go to the left, it really won't do much. It'll just rotate around the tree. But I usually do get it there, get it straight. And then when I ratchet down now, when I go to the right, that's when it's going to lock. So I'm going to step in front of the camera here and see if it's tightening. And so that is now tight to the tree. So I'm just pointing this out. You always take into account this little angle you're going to get. And it's going to always move and lock in the direction of the line going into your load line going in. So it's always going to lean towards the load line. And so from there, you know, I would attach myself, I would climb. I'd be up, you know, simulating everything here at ground level. I've climbed SRT, right? So what we're doing here is we're switching over to SRT. When we use these kind of configurations, I'm always going to be SRT climbing. If I were just using a false crotch, I can use a doubled rope. And that's one of the reasons that you'll see me moving towards thicker ropes that I find more palatable for SRT applications. It's why you'll see me doing more content on SRT. It's for these applications and building a universal system which can do both. Okay, so I'm up there, I do my hunt, it's time to rappel. All I need to do is unlock this. And yeah, that's a little precarious thinking that my release hitch is ready to go. But in fact, when this is under load, it is very difficult. You'd have to put a lot of force on this to release it. And so we don't unlock it until we're ready for rappel. We attach our retrieval line here. We rappel to the ground. And of course, I'm in a position where I can simply pull it. Again, it's always best to pull away from the tree, walk away from the tree when you're releasing it. But that's all I needed to do to release it. Okay, so I'm down on the ground and it's time to retrieve my line and to replace it with the Paracord preset. Just repeat the process in reverse. I'll tie a running Highwayman's hitch here. It's fairly easy to do because just grabbing bites and ends and you're not dressing it very much. Fairly easy to do even with gloves on, but you'd have to work on that. So now I'm going to replace it. I pull the rope. And I'm good. Now, if it was your very last trip to the tree and you wanted to retrieve this system, there are ways to do that. And we'll go over those in a future video. But long story short is that if it was your very last trip and you wanted to remove this and not come back with another way to do it, I would retie to the tree. I would climb as high as I can, and I would put a JRB hitch right on the trunk of the tree, transfer over to it, remove this completely, and then rappel to the ground. But we'll cover that in a future video. Okay, so again, I used paracord, but I want you to use, again, 1-inch polyester webbing has a breaking strength, depending on flat or tubular webbing, of over 3,000 pounds. When we double it like this, it's potentially as strong as the carabiner that we use to fashion this device. And so if we think there's any risk that it has been destabilized, you can just transform your false crotch into a floating anchor. Again, I needed just a little bit more webbing to do it. Girth hitch in my right hand, passes through with the end, position it where I want it, cinch it down, put our carabiner on there. And again, if we wanted this to be a floating anchor, I would just want this to be a little bit longer. All right, guys, please be careful if you try any of this. This is what I do, just a demonstration, but trying to give you ideas to make sure that you're tied in at all times, and this is decent. You can use this, and you'll be seeing me use this same idea for other types of climbing. You can use this for climbing up a ladder tree stand. You can leave something like this and return to it in a future hunt, or potentially even a future season. We'll talk more about that in a future video.